why I'm here today. I'm here to declare myself an independent candidate.
That was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announcing his defection from the Democratic Party to run for president as an independent. In his fiery speech, RFK Jr. declared independence for America from corporations, from Wall Street, and from Big Pharma, which he maintains is stoking division in this country. His quest to bring an end to the two-party system was not welcomed by his immediate family. His sister, Kerry Kennedy, released a statement on their behalf, rebuking his announcement and writing, quote, "Bobby might share the name as same name as our father, but he does not share the same values, vision, or judgment. Today's announcement, deeply saddening for us. We denounce his candidacy and believe it to be perilous for our country."
The Republican National Committee also denounced RFK Jr.'s switch. Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel released a statement writing, quote, "Make no mistake, a Democrat in independence clothing is still a Democrat. RFK Jr. cannot hide from his record. He is your typical elitist liberal, and voters won't be fooled." As a Democratic candidate, polls showed that RFK Jr. tracked well with voters, pulling in 14%, according to a Reuters Ipsos poll released last week, which may not seem consequential, but it's enough to disrupt GOP frontrunner Trump's support, as well as President Joe Biden's, according to an analysis from CNN. This is what's so interesting. So there was some reporting at the end of last week that the Trump campaign had some internal conversation about how to best respond to RFK Jr. after some of this polling suggested that he could pull more potentially from Donald Trump than Joe Biden. There was a statement by one of Trump's campaign spokesperson, Stephen Chung, who said in no uncertain terms that RFK Jr. is not a conservative. He says voters should not be deceived by anyone who pretends to have conservative values. The fact is that RFK has a disturbing background steeped in radical liberal positions, whether he's a China sympathizer, denigrating gun owners, promoting business-killing green policies, or supporting on-demand abortion. An RFK candidacy is nothing more than a vanity project, for a liberal candidate to cash in on his family's name. We haven't seen this kind of energy against RFK Jr. from Republicans up until this point.
Well, now they perceive him as a threat.
Exactly.
They didn't perceive him as a threat before. And look, the truth is that he has, at this point, a mix of political opinions that do not, frankly, fit neatly into any category. He has some opinions that are welcome on the populist left. He has some opinions that are more conservative in nature. He has a lot of his COVID-related opinions, and some, but not all, of his foreign policy opinions fit somewhat within a libertarian framework, which is why he was drawing a lot of interest from my own party. He attended a lot of libertarian gatherings in the last few months. He was clearly meeting with libertarian-aligned people. He had a lot of engagement on social media with the LP account. That said, what he announced about Israel the other day, support for additional military funding, really is at odds with a kind of fundamental view of the Libertarian Party that we should just not. Without taking a side in the conflict, that's not it. It's just the U.S. should not be in the business. The U.S. taxpayer should not be in the business of paying for another country's defense. So they were pushing back on him there. So anyway, he's running as an independent. Look, it is possible that he hurts Trump more than Biden. It's possible he hurts Biden slightly more because of the Kennedy family name and being associated with Democrats. It's possible that he draws some voters from both sides and it's kind of a wash. And also he draws some voters who would have voted Libertarian, Green, or just would not have voted at all, frankly. So everybody needs to chill out. I also don't, frankly, care if he costs a major party voters because they're not speaking to the issues he's talking about in terms of COVID authoritarianism and some other things. So I don't really think there's a reason to panic, but if there was a reason to panic, I frankly wouldn't care if it hurt the major parties either way.
That's what's so interesting. I mean, much like wokeness seems to have taken a back seat as a kind of driver of the conversation on the right, it does seem also like some of the COVID policy stuff seems not to be as galvanizing.
Well, I mean, they are going away, thankfully.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It was a bell that could only be rung so many times. I mean, yeah. A caveat that it's not actually gone away. You can feel how you feel about how serious it is, and people feeling like they need to protect themselves in different ways. But we don't.
Well, I mean, the policies have mostly gone by the wayside,
yes,
which
the objectionable.
Mostly, not entirely, but mostly.
Have gone away. So there's nothing really to complain about anymore. And it's also worth noting that when we talked yesterday about the Libertarian Party Twitter account, at least, offering. Basically rejecting RFK Jr. on the internet a couple of days ago, it wasn't just because RFK Jr. kind of expressed support for Israel. Many people, including many leftists who have been strong advocates for Palestinian rights, expressed support of Israel and the civilian casualties that, of course, were not responsible and were innocents and were victims of a war crime. But they also say things about wanting to get to the root causes and ending the occupation. That's not only not something that RFK Jr. has said, which angers the left, it makes him unsupportable by many leftists, but also said we must provide Israel with whatever it needs to defend itself. Again, some of this kind of blank check language that he and others found so objectionable when it came to Ukraine. And I do wonder if at this point, not saying anything about ending the occupation, having said so many things that are frankly very, very aggressive with respect to the Israel-Palestine issue, the funding issue being inconsistent with respect to the Ukraine stuff. Someone who labeled themselves as a Kennedy Democrat up until 3 days ago or whatever it was on their website, and who very much was hoping to trade on this popularity of a liberal identity, which is now very toxic to both sides of the camp, the anti-establishment camp that he was appealing to, whether or not this whole phenomenon is going to fizzle away pretty quickly, especially if it is true that he is seen as a threat to Republicans and is no longer given the boost by people like Elon Musk or other big accounts, Joe Rogan, et cetera.
I saw our former co-host Kim Iverson, who has her own channel, independent channel, and she's been, I think, quite positively disposed to him. She's interviewed him on her show. I saw her tweeting that this really would cost him her support for what he said there. Look, and I don't want to be too critical of him. I'm glad that he has brought attention to a lot of issues where I am more in line with him. Again, in terms of the COVID stuff, in terms of Ukraine, I'm glad he has given a voice to and hopefully a voice not technically actually in the Republican contingent, but expressing the frustrations of there are people who self-identified or used to self-identify at least as Democrats who didn't quite like the response on all fronts either. So I think and also, Joe Biden deserved a challenger. All our political figures deserve a challenger. So I think his involvement was positive and could continue to be positive, but I don't agree with him on everything. And I didn't agree with him on everything even before this. A lot of his regulatory policies on energy and drugs are probably more in line with your views and not in line with mine. And it was always going to be interesting to see, well, how much is he changing his mind on those enough to be acceptable to a libertarian? And that was, always going to be a difficult marriage.
Well, it is interesting. I think the most important, perhaps, and most relevant prong of his analysis and what he's been running on is the anti-corruption piece, which hasn't got as much airing by the media, because I do think that some of the more right-leaning outlets that boosted his campaign weren't as interested in some of that stuff. Corporate capture of the regulatory industry wasn't as sexy as some of the COVID policies and stuff like that. But given what's going on in the House with this weird alliance emerging between Matt Gaetz and Ro Khanna over some of these big ticket anti-corruption items, I would love to hear him start to talk about real politics and give us a sense of who he would be as a president. What side of this would he be on as we're looking at Matt Gaetz taking these stands on the House floor, calling out corruption and getting booed by his own caucus? Where does Kennedy fit in all of that? And I think it would also help the voter perhaps to see him less as a kind of popular figure, a cartoon, an icon, whatever it is, like almost like a caricature of a person, and more as a politician in a role that he is actually advocating for right now as president. So we'll see if we see a pivot at all towards some real politics now that he has made this shift in his campaign. To being an independent. Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see also as this continues what impact he does have on the race. If his poll numbers go up or down, if they go up enough that he could qualify. I mean, I think it would be to the benefit of the American people if there was actually a debate with the nominees, assuming they're Donald Trump and Joe Biden or whoever they are, but probably those two, and Kennedy. I think that would be enormously beneficial for the democratic process. So, that's one reason to kind of to keep an eye out for him, I think. I
do think there might be some interesting implications for his ability to get onto a debate stage now that he's an independent and not just competing with the Democratic Party as well. So we'll keep you updated on that. Stick around. More Rising right after this.